So we're going to create animations in the zone editor, go in the object settings and load the animations tab. We are going to create and name two animations, a walking sequence and an idle sequence. Here, as you can see, we have a 3D object that we have bought on a website. Usually when you buy a 3D model, the animation sequences are written, so the guy who created the mesh, the model, tells you, okay, from frame 0 to frame 100 it's an idle sequence, from frame 101 to frame 150 it's a walking sequence, from frame 151 to frame 1000 it's a jumping sequence, whatever. So here we are defining the two sequences. If you don't have this, if you do not have this information, then type 0 and 10,000, and between those two boundaries you can move the cursor, and you will be able to see where every animation starts. That's not really, well, that's a bit boring, but at least you can find the information that is missing. Well, anyway, usually you will have to do that, because if you buy a model from a website, or if you buy it from another guy who created the 3D model, that's pretty okay. He will normally tell you the information that you require. As you can see here, I am well, working on the limbs of the animation. So every limb that the 3D modeler has decided to implement on his model. Sometimes I can decide that some limbs will be excluded, but sometimes they will be included and their children will be included. So children is, for example, well, a hand is a children for an elbow, which is a children for a shoulder. So we have two animations here, walking sequence and an idle sequence, and to play them in the game we are going to make another tutorial for that, another video about the logic editor. Now let's talk about physics. In the physics tab you can decide whether the 3D model, the 3D object, will be handled by the physics engine or not. Once you have ticked this box, you can decide if the object is a static object, so it doesn't move, a dynamic object, so an object that is that your player will be able to interact with, or a cinematic object, so you can interact with the object, but he's not really concerned by physical laws, by physics. For example, an elevator or something like that. Well, the last tab of this video is the collision tab. So you can choose what kind of collisions your character will have. So the first one being without any collision, if you are a ghost, for example. An ellipse, like you know, the character is well, it's a character. And the last thing, of course, here is a static polygon, so for static objects. Well, if your character is surrounded by an ellipse, you can decide to activate gravity. You can set the strength of gravity with this little gauge here. So then you can set, of course, the angle from which your character is gonna be, well, is gonna slip, you know, on a slope. Slip on a slope, that's funny. Well, for example, if the angle is 20 degrees, it means that every slope, well, if the character walks on a slope and that the slope is tougher than 20 degrees, then it will slip, the character will slip down the slope. And the last thing is, well, the height of a step, a stair step actually. So this means if you set the value to 5, for example, that everything which is above 5, height-wise, will be too high for the character to cross it only by walking. He will have to jump, or to climb, or to do something. And everything below this value, below this 5, means that he can cross it by walking, just as if it were a stair step. I guess that's all of it. have fun using Your Game 3D, and have a good night.